Hi, I'm Adam and I'm recording this video on the Chess with Narek website. Today we're going to be talking about fortresses. So a fortress in chess is a position where the side that's up material in an endgame usually can't win because the other side has their pieces set up in a certain way that prevents the side that's up material from gaining advantage. So for example, in this position, black two enough of an advantage to win a game easily. However, we'll notice that because of the way that white and black's pawns are all locked up together, there's actually no way for black's rooks to make progress. So even the engine is confused here, as we'll notice from the bar. The engine here thinks this position is minus 13, so it will be totally winning for black. However, if we click through for a while, and we'll make, let's say, rook c8, king d3, we'll see that the engine very quickly changes its mind and realizes that this is actually a draw. So, okay, and it gets confused again. Okay, the engine's very confused here. But the point is that no matter what black does, there's no way to break in. The only thing you could try here with the black pieces is maybe trying to sacrifice the rook with a move like rook f5. And this would be winning if white had to take it, because let's say white played g pawn takes f5. Now this position would be totally winning, because this pawn could start pushing to create space for the rook. So for example, we could go rook g8, king f2, and g4. And now all of a sudden this rook is going to get in behind and start attacking all white's pawns, and this position is going to be a very easy win for black. However, white does not have to take the rook on f5, and for that reason it's a draw. So let's go back. So okay, after rook f5, white can continue to draw this game simply by playing a random king move, like let's say king d3. And as long as we don't take this rook, it's a draw. So okay, so this is a very sort of easy example, so let's move on to a more difficult one. So in this position, this looks like it should be completely winning for white, because white is up a bishop and a pawn. However, this is actually a very famous example of a fortress, because black's king can set up in the corner to make sure that it never gets past. And the reason this is a draw is because the square that the pawn is promoting to is the opposite color to the square that the bishop controls. So because of this, the bishop will never be able to force the king out of the corner. So let's say white goes king f4, and then black goes king g7, and then white goes king g5. So okay, we're just moving our king and our pawn forward together, and eventually we're going to try to promote it. So now black continues his plan of running into the corner. So black goes king h8. Okay, white pushes the pawn. Now all black has to do to draw this game is to shuffle in the corner and not leave. So okay, king g7, h5, king h8, h6. And now we reach the important part of the endgame. So now in this position, we'll notice that it's very difficult to make progress with white. So let's say black plays a random move like king g8, shuffling in the corner. So now we need to review white's options. So first of all, white's first option is just push the king and the pawn together. However, this will be a draw very quickly because of stalemate. So now the black king has no squares and it's a draw. So okay, let's move on to the next way you can try to win, which is by coordinating the bishop and the pawn, but that has the exact same problem. So let's say we go bishop e4 to control the square the pawn wants to push to. Then black goes king h8. And now if we go h7, we think we made good progress here because it's not stalemate anymore. However, in this position, after black's king shuffles to g7, so let's say we go h7, h7, king g7. Now there's still no good way to make progress, because if we just move the bishop, then the king will go back into the corner, and if we move the king will go back into the corner, and if we bring our king up, it's stalemate again. So because the pawn is the opposite color, is promoting to the opposite color square that the bishop controls, this bishop isn't actually very useful, and it's a draw in the same way it would be if it was just king and pawn versus king. However, if we were to swap these pieces over to the other side of the board, so let's fly them over here. Okay, so let's say this king was on a7. And this king is on b4. Now this endgame would actually be a very easy win, because now the bishop controls the square that the pawn wants to promote to. So let's say black would play king b8, and we'll go a5, and then king a7, and then king b5. And now we'll go for the exact same idea. But now the difference is the king is forced to get out of the corner. So after king b6, here, all the squares the king would like to go to are all controlled by our bishop and our king. And so because of this, black's king will be forced out of the corner. And now this is a very easy win, because now we can just go a6, a7, a8, and queen. So bishop and pawn versus king is only a fortress if two things happen. The first thing is the pawn has to be an edge pawn, so it has to be an a pawn or a h pawn. And the second thing that has to happen is that the color bishop they have has to be the opposite color to the square that the pawn is queening on. So if the pawn was over this side, then it would be queening on h8, so it's the wrong color square. But if it's queening on this side, it's queening on a8, which is a light square. It's the right color square. So now we can just go a6, king b8, a7, and then it has to go king c8, and we queen on the next move. So this will be totally winning. So okay, let's move on to the next example. So the example number 3, and this is an opposite color bishop endgame. So opposite color bishop endgames are very famous because lots and lots of them are draws. And the reason so many opposite color bishop endgames are draws is because the two bishops, the dark square bishop and the light square bishop, are never going to cross each other's paths. So this bishop will never attack this bishop, and this bishop will never attack this bishop. So because of this, there's lots of ways that we can set up draws. So we'll notice that in this position, black is up 2 pawns. So black normally should be completely winning. However, in this position, because of the way white's king and bishop are set up, this is actually a complete draw, because there's just no way to move those pieces out there. So let's say black would play king e6, for example. Now all we have to do to draw this game of white is to shuffle our bishop backwards and forwards forever, like this. So then we can go from there to there, we can go this way, and all we do is shuffle forever, and black will never make any progress. So let's take bishop g6, king f6, bishop e4, king g5, bishop c6, and there's just no way to ever push these pawns, because this pawn and this pawn, these two pawns, the d and f pawn, are both completely blocked by the king and the pawn, and this pawn is defended by the bishop, so it can never be taken, and this bishop and pawn and king work together to stop the e pawn from moving forward. So because of this, there's just no way to make progress, and sacrificing the pawn doesn't help, because the other two pawns are still completely blocked. So this is actually a very famous example of a draw. So okay, let's move on to a slightly more difficult version of the same thing. So this endgame, despite the engine thinking it's winning, is actually also a draw. The engine just hasn't spotted it yet. So this position, we'd like to set up a fortress. However, fortresses and opposite color bishop endgames only apply when the pawns are on the opposite colored square to your bishop. So this pawn, if this pawn was on this square, then this would be totally drawn, because okay, our bishop would go here, our king would go here, and all the pawns would be blockaded again. So now we have to try to find a way to set that up to make the draw. And this pawn isn't actually so important, because this pawn isn't helping us draw the game, because we're still down 2 pawns. So okay, so because of that, the drawing move here is c5, and so black has to take the pawn or move the bishop away, because otherwise he'll lose the bishop. So let's say he goes bishop c5, and now after the opponent goes bishop b3, and now you have to go e5 or you lose the pawn, so e5, and now all of a sudden this game is a draw again, because we go bishop e6, and then we bring our king to e4, and then we just shuffle backwards and forwards, and all the pawns are blockaded again. So this is a draw in the same way. So okay, let's look at one more example. We'll go on to this one, and this is a very famous example of a fortress, because the rook and the pawn actually work very well together in this position to make sure that the queen and the king never get in. So black is up a queen for a rook and a pawn, so black is up 3 points of material. So usually this position will be totally winning. However, in this specific version, it's actually a complete draw, because there's just no way to make progress here. So the way black would usually try to win this position would be to bring the king and the queen together up towards the king, with white's king, and try to put pressure on it and give checkmate in some way like this. But because the rook is here, it actually controls this whole line and this whole line, so it stops the king from getting in. So now there's just no way for black to make progress. So let's say black gives a check. We just run away. Okay, if black gives another check, we just run back. So if black keeps checking us, we'll just keep repeating backwards and forwards with the king. So that's no way to make a draw. So because of this, so let's say black has to find a new way to win. So let's say we'll give one more check just to put the queen on a more centralized square, because queens are often stronger when they're in the middle of the board. So okay, let's say black had to try to win with the king, but after king g4, the king can't come any further because this pawn and rook work well together to control the squares. And all you would have to do here is shuffle the rook backwards and forwards from here to here and from there to there, and keep doing that forever, and it'll be an easy draw. So okay, now we'll go into a bit of a challenging one. So if you'd like, you can pause the video and try to figure out how to create a fortress here. So we know we want to bring the rook from here to this square, so that I can shuffle between here and there forever. However, there's only one correct way to do this, and the reason for this is because oftentimes in rook versus queen endgames, when the rook is far away from the queen, there'll often be checks given where the queen will attack the rook and the king at the same time. For example, if the rook were to move to a random square like a7, then queen d4 check would attack the rook and the king at the same time, and this would be completely winning for black. So we have to find a way to bring the rook back into the game to f3 without getting checked. So okay, so first of all, let's say we played rook a3. This would actually be too slow. So rook a3 would be too slow because black would go queen c2. And if the king goes back, we'll go queen to c1 check, winning the rook. So okay, let's go back. So if we can't do it with rook a3, then the way to do it in this position is rook g8 check. And after king f4, now we go rook f8 check. So because we're making every move with check, black doesn't get a chance to check our king and try to win our rook. So now after rook f8 check, king g4, and rook f3. Now we're back to the same fortress position we looked at in the last one. This is an easy draw. So the thing to remember for rook versus queen fortresses is the rook and the king have to be close to each other. The rook has to be defended by a pawn, and the king has to be cut off by the rook. So for example, if the king was in here, then this is most likely winning, because now the king and the queen can work together to attack the king. So the king really should be outside of the rook. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you've learned something, and see you next time.